Hi, and welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today on the show, Sienna, a former escort, is going to be with us. She has quite the story, quite the compelling story to tell. We use that word a lot around here because every single time we're doing an interview, it is very compelling. And it is all in the name of helping parents, grandparents, and kids around the world. We'll be back with more right after this.
Do you notice a change in your child? Do you wonder what's going on with my child? Do you finally see something others have been seeing for some time now? Do you see the ideology and indoctrination after your child returns home from school every day? Do you see? Yes, you do see the harm and the confusion they are causing. Do you see the role they are playing on your child's life and development? Do you see? Yes, you see now. And now you have questions. At Unmasking the Trans Movement, we're here to help answer those tough questions you can't ask anyone else, or answers that are hard to find. We discuss the many topics of this evil agenda indoctrinating our children into a world of self-destructive deviance, constant medical care, and human degradation. Our webinars provide access to supporting groups discussing the tough issues you want to talk about with real parents and experts alike. Sign up and become a member now and you'll save 30% off your first-time membership starting at just $7. Select from our bronze, silver, and gold packages, all with different options depending on your needs. Our mission is clear: to unmask the deception and protect the most vulnerable among us, women and children. For webinar dates, times, and pricing, please visit our website at unmaskingthetransmovement.com/webinars.
Welcome back. Today, John Euler and Sienna, a former escort, are going to sit down and have a great discussion where they're going to educate not only yourselves, but give you the power to educate others as well. All in one big half-hour excellent episode. John is with us right now. John, Sienna comes with such a story that I think based on reading a little bit about that prior to now, it's definitely one of those situations where you're in a little bit of shock as to how somebody could go through that, come out of that, and bounce back the way that she has and even be here today. So kudos to her, obviously. But why don't you fill our viewers in on really, I guess, a preamble to what today's episode is about?
Brad, and thank you as always, Brad. We could not do this without you.
Thank you.
I often say this is going to be, as we say, compelling. That's not going to be the word for it. We've covered a lot of topics, understandably and purposely so. The Unmasking the Trans Movement looks at things from a macro, a top-down level, and a micro level on the ground, what's happening, so that people can begin to understand the different factors and influences that are using the trans movement to gain access to vulnerable kids. And what we are going to hear with Sienna, and she is a hero in my mind. I have not told her that, but I have now. Very few people understand the power and the pressure that is brought to bear on young people. But those that get sucked in and try to make their way out, especially those that get sucked into the area of prostitution, we're going to include OnlyFans in that. This is part and parcel of what is being pushed on kids, especially through SOGI sex ed, that is sexual orientation and gender identity. It's very highly sexualized material. Most people now are familiar with, or at least have heard about, the deviant material, the books that are being pumped into schools, that we've seen agitation and school boards over these books. These books are used to sexually groom kids, to normalize deviance, that if they were regular photographs, the publishers and those putting it in front of kids would be arrested. But because these are cartoons or drawings, they can put them in front of kids. what it does is it normalizes things that these kids would never be exposed to. And then they are given the message that not only is this okay, but on top of everything else, that some of them might want to even consider prostitution because it is a form of work that helps empower women, that is sucking a lot of kids in, especially young women, into dabbling, putting their foot in this realm. And Sienna found herself in the midst of that. And what is so important about her story is she has come out of that. But on top of everything else, she was really almost an activist or an advocate for that. She used to write about it. She had plenty of followers then, right? But all of a sudden she became honest with herself. And then what happened? She started speaking out. And now she has been vilified, she has been attacked, but in my mind, in our mind, she is a hero. And Sienna, thank you for being a part of our program.
Thank you for having me and inviting me.
Well, you have a story to tell. You are now someone speaking truth into darkness, but there's a context behind it. There's a story. So would you share what you're doing? So you're speaking to issues, and then give the backstory, give your personal story for us.
Okay, yes. So I'll start by saying that I had a podcast that I made in 2019 that I made because I wanted to show who an escort was, that anyone could become an escort. So I probably interviewed, I don't know, like 30, maybe 35 escorts. I interviewed some sex positive therapists, actually, a client, a spouse that found out her husband was a client. Anyways, that's all there. And that was pretty popular. And then I kind of realized that on the podcast, it was all biased towards positive things, which obviously was a flaw. No one's going to actually say what they don't like about escorting while clients are listening. So it ended up being like this PR tour for escorts. And while they did say, like, you know, who they were and how they got into the industry, it was biased towards only saying the good things. So I inadvertently made this thing that just glamorized it entirely, which was not what I was going for. After I thought about it a lot, what I was really going for was I was trying to find a way to kind of re-enter civil society, because it's so isolating and I didn't know how I was going to get out of the industry. And so I kind of wanted to show that anyone could be an escort. So like, we shouldn't stigmatize certain people, and we should like let them back into society when they decide they're done with escorting. But that's not actually what I created. So I started writing this Substack that is all the actual ways I feel about it. And I stopped working, and that's where we are now.
I would say that speaks to your integrity. How easy it would be to just step away, to not address it. That would be difficult enough. But as you say, you had quite the following. About approximately how many people were following you were on Twitter and other social media?
Yeah, I don't know, like 30,000. And each episode that I made of the podcast got between like 3,000 and 6,000 listens. So I don't know, like it's not huge, but it's not nothing.
Right. So you had established a name for yourself, but you decided to step away from that. But even more than that, and here you are even on our program, you're now trying to shine the light. You're unmasking this whole area. So would you walk us through your journey? Because you're going to be talking to younger, as it were, Siennas.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny, I avoided telling my own story, even though I was interviewing other people. I kept not saying my own story. So I think this is like the first time I try to, so I might be a little bit bumpy, but I'll do my best. I was 21 years old and I got a holiday work visa to live abroad. I was supposed to go with a friend, but they ended up not coming. So I was in a foreign country alone, and I kept trying to get jobs and they kept not paying me. And I got pretty depressed. And then I watched Pretty Woman one night, I don't know, just trying to find some kind of form of entertainment. And I was like, she asked Richard Gere for like $20 or something. And I was like, $20? Like, there's no way that's all she charges. And then I literally Googled, well, I wrote prostitutes in my area, which was the wrong word because nothing came up. And then I found out that it was escort is the word. And then I looked that up and I was like, And then I was looking for jobs and I saw like suspicious ones saying they wanted open-minded females, and I like put it together and I'm like, oh, like, and all these things just happened at the same time. And I decided to answer it because I needed a job. And then yeah, I ended up working for this woman in her 50s. I met her one time in person, and beyond that, she just called me and told me like where to go. And she had a driver, but I'd use taxis a lot.
Sienna, can I
I-
stop you? So it's very interesting because people that are not familiar with the industry or this realm, they often think in terms of pimps being males. But what you just said was you were working for a female.
yeah, she had an agency, and I don't know, they call themselves agency owners, right? They don't call themselves pimps.
That's right. They've rebranded themselves. Do you think it's correct to
It's
reference them?
okay, so she like often these agency owners, they're ex-prostitutes themselves, so it's like extra weird because you know that they know exactly what goes into that. She wouldn't let me say no to a booking and keep the job. So while she didn't force me to go to a booking, she's like, well, you're not going to keep working for me if you don't go to every booking that I tell you to go to. So I don't know where that falls on the spectrum of like coercion, but I realized that I was very obedient to authority, and I would just do things that I was told to do and then be like, I wonder like if I'm allowed to say no to this, or like, is this something that I should be doing? And like, why am I just following orders given to me by someone older than me? And it was just kind of embarrassing to realize that I did that. And I had to be in a situation that I realized was really fucked up to actually do something about it. Yeah. Okay, now I forget what I was going on
That's
about.
listen, what you just said is so powerful because that is what oftentimes is either misunderstood or used against the victim or the survivor. Because what's been thrown out is, well, listen, this is something that is voluntary. These girls don't have to do it. You know, and you look at the people that say that, and they tend to have a vested interest in covering up the darkness. So either they have financial stake, or what I would say is this: they are, well, profiting off of, or these are people that are using women's bodies in this capacity. So either they're on the take or they're using them, and they don't want this unmasked. So they glamorize this. We have the pretty woman picture. But little do people know that you can create a situation where you've created the perfect storm emotionally and psychologically, to where, yeah, it looks like somebody could just walk away. But when somebody's in it so deep and they've been chipped away in terms of a sense of self that they almost can't see for looking, there's very similar characteristics to a cult and a cult leader. So there's a lot of psychological impact and damage that happens to these young women on top of them being used. And then you have a sense of shame. I know that prior to recording, you had referenced that sense of shame kept you stuck in, it became a very damaging cycle.
The way that I would describe it is, so now that I'm self-reflecting, like, did I ever have to do prostitution? Like, I guess that is not an objective reality. No, I wasn't in Africa, you know, I was in a G7 country. But it seemed like that was the only solution, and I was just alone, and this was an option, and I didn't know what else to do, and so I took it. And then once you do this, if you never actually had to, that's such a hard pill to swallow. Like, you did this thing that made you feel like you wanted to die, but you didn't actually have to. And it's like, no. I had to do sex work. Like, I have to. There's no other options for me. And so then you start justifying it, and then you just want to get more money for it. But it's all built off of that. I had no other choice. I had to do this, and that's why I'm doing it. And then it's empowering because I changed my situation. And if you want any chance at getting respect from clients or from yourself, you have to say that you made an empowered choice, not that I guess you fell for something, or you were insecure, or just made a mistake once, or I don't know.
You know, what just came to mind also is probably what happens when young people, they want to go into the film industry, be a recording artist. And look at what happened with the Weinstein situation, the casting couch. So you have a trusting, unsuspecting person, or modeling agencies, right? They target these young, vulnerable kids. And so they get them in, and there's such a shock value that before you know it, these young people have young women. Same thing with young, vulnerable guys. They allow themselves to be put in situations because it unfolds before them. They're not prepared for the emotional, the psychological repercussions. And so it's almost like it, before they know it, they're in too deep. Would that be a fair assertion?
Yeah, I would say so. I'd say at the beginning, you're usually people that enter sex work, they do it because of pressing financial needs. That is the typical reason. And so initially, you're so happy to be making money because you have whatever pressing financial issue that you're just really thankful that this option exists. And then once that kind of subsides, like I didn't notice that the same financial constraints weren't existent anymore. Like I lived under that same mental model for like a decade. I was like, I have to see every client because I need money. And it's like that wasn't a reflection of reality anymore. But I kept living there for all of the time after that. It's not something that you discuss with people. You don't tell people how you feel about the work you're doing. You say, I like this. This is good. And then you just get used to dissociating, not thinking about it too deeply, only focusing on the good parts. And when you feel upset, you're like, oh, this was just a bad day. This was just a bad client. That's fine. But I like this job. And it's like, oof. It's kind of, I was writing about this today. It's kind of like Stockholm syndrome, you know? It's like you only focus on the good parts and not on the bad parts. And you just pretend like it's not this huge abusive relationship that's actually destroying you because you've told yourself it's safe to go with it.
Very similar to the term trauma bonding. I tell clients that trauma bonding really is better reframed as half-baked healing, but when it's unfolding. So trauma bonding is sort of when you come out and you've set some boundaries, but that pull to go back. So oftentimes those in abusive situations, or if somebody comes out of a very toxic family, right? They have a love-hate relationship with their mother or their father, and somehow they set boundaries and then they end up going back. So there's a cycle that is repeated. But I would concur that the psychological impact, and so what the trans movement, what the pushers of the trans movement do is they understand the psychological impact. They understand a lot about psychology, whether they've taken formal courses or not. They understand about manipulation. They understand how to break boundaries down and end up causing someone to accept and even supposedly be okay with self-harm. I mean, you know, to sell the idea to a young woman, that's why they don't like the pictures, right? We're going to sell these things. I mean, it's the ultimate bait and switch. But it's pretty tough to sell to a young woman unless you've done a lot of mental and emotional manipulation to tell a young woman, hey, tell you what, just like, if you go into prostitution, that's going to be a good thing for you. Just allow yourself to be used. Or how about the idea that we're going to slice off both your breasts? You'll feel better about yourself. The amount of manipulation that precedes that is extremely profound.
I think it's important to say that my perspective comes not from sex trafficking, but from consensually choosing it. So it kind of applies more to this because I was telling myself, this is all my choice. And it's like, well, that doesn't make it like a better choice. You don't still like understand the repercussions of your actions. And I guess it's worth, because I was thinking about this earlier today. I obviously consider a person with gender dysphoria to be a completely separate issue from the trans movement. Like they're completely different topics to me. But the trans movement, I guess there's no inherent meaning in things like sex or sexuality. Like everything has whatever meaning you ascribe to it that day, and it can be fluid and changed. And while like it's okay to explore your sexuality, that happens after a certain age, that happens within like boundaries, or it's like there'll be no meaning to it. And then you won't have a problem doing something like selling sex to whomever, and then you'll just be an empty shell of a person. I know because I've been there. Oh, I had something else to say.
Well, Sienna, what was so powerful about what you just said is there's a disconnection from self, but we can't disconnect ourselves from ourselves. To think there's going to be no long-term repercussions, and I know you had mentioned previously before we started recording that you got to a point where you had shame, you didn't want to share with your parents what you were doing. It's almost, it forced you into a duplicitous or a double life.
I can share that. Yeah. I don't really have a close relationship with my family. It's been like that for a long time. But I would stop. Like when you go out and do things, you either have to tell people I'm a prostitute when they ask, what do you do? And so you either lie to them or, tell them the truth, and then everything becomes about you because people have a million questions and they're upset. And you can't just live a normal life. And if you do want to live a normal life, that involves a lot of lying. So you just kind of end up like avoiding situations, is what I did. And yeah, I avoided conversations with people because there's nothing to update in your life like when this is such a big part of your life. And what ends up happening when you pick this is you're foregoing your real life that you could have been living for all those years. So like now I'm 30 years old and I could have spent all these years that I was doing sex work, doing an actual career that would have gotten me some kind of like capital, that now I could have worked in an industry for 5 years. And now I have some like skills, right? But it's nothing even close to what you'd get working an actual job and building capital. And the thing about identity and separating identity is like your actual identity and who you are is such a core part of you finding meaning in life. And that is, you derive meaning as from being a woman, having a relationship with, a man in a marriage, and like having kids, maybe a real relationship. And if you start to like fragment the identity, then what's left? You'll just end up doing it's very nihilistic and bleak. And I don't know.
Let's say you're talking to, because you're probably going to be talking to a younger Sienna. There are probably points along the way, points of reflection, as you're thinking back to your life, where you could have exited. So we're talking to, let's say, a younger Sienna that is thinking about getting involved in this. And if you want to talk about OnlyFans, because that's a doorway into this. So think in terms of the Sienna that is toying with this idea. And then also the Sienna that has gotten into it and is wondering, should they stay? Should they go?
Okay. Well, I guess I'll focus this a bit more on OnlyFans because I don't know how many people listening are going to be like full-blown prostitutes. But I also did OnlyFans. Like when the pandemic started, a lot of friends of mine were like, oh, we're doing this thing. You should do it too, since you're already a sex worker. So I did. The reality of it, of the money you make, first off, let's just say the majority, I don't know, like 70, 80, 90% of people on that platform make like less than $1,000 a month. And that is usually like every single day you log into that and you do some kind of work. And then if you add up the money you make with the hours invested, that's way less than minimum wage for most people. And what you've given up is actual access to your body. And not only that, but men that are expecting you to talk back to them, to give up personal information, to have a full-blown relationship with them for like $3 to $5 a month. And in no world is that even a good form of employment if you want to not even go down how it makes you feel at the end of the day. So just purely from a business perspective, it's a terrible life choice. You could work a minimum job and make more money. It just felt dirty. It felt wrong. It felt like these men didn't deserve access to me. And I wondered why I was doing it, but I'd already started. And then people absolutely do save all these photos. They post them other places. They with your photos to make money off of them. Someone virtually hacked my iPhone and computer and sent my family my nudes. Like that's just like part of it. That's just like a normal part of it. And then it's just this thing that you get to hide for the rest of your life because it's not something you want to do forever. It's nothing you're proud of. So you either get to tell everyone that you date or are with in the future because, you don't want to lie to people, or it's anyways, okay, that, and then we'll go on to prostitution, which, it's one thing to say it's empowering to make money and then have all this freedom, have the freedom of time because you made money, but you're not working 40 hours a week as a prostitute. You're working, I don't know, like 5, 10, 15 hours, 20 hours. It's not a full-time job. So that rate that you're making, like it's actually not that much money for most people. There's also a lot of women that do it. You're going to be comparing yourself, and women are really mean. So the clients are going to be expecting more from you because there's so many women doing it. You're going to be in these situations where men are haggling over you while you're either naked or half naked, asking you to perform certain acts. And you're going to be like, I thought this was supposed to be empowering. Like, why are you treating me like an object? And then they'll be like, this is what I paid for, right? And what are you going to say back to that? No, like you are technically selling access to your body. It's not glamorous. It's not empowering. It's the opposite. It's giving away your power for a very small amount of money. And you brought up the PTSD thing, and like reading his book was the first time I realized that I had PTSD. Like often when I'm like walking or exercising, just trying to like really want to have a quiet mind and I'm peaceful, that's when I get like flashbacks of like people looking at me, wanting me to want them, or looking at me and like just wanting love or wanting something. And you're just like, ugh, like I wish I could forget it. But so yeah, I would say it's not worth it. And I told you last time that I ended up looking up, ex-convicts because I didn't know how to kind of re-enter society with how isolated and separated from like real life I still feel now. I'm just talking like I don't, but I absolutely feel this way every day. I'm hoping it goes away one day. But it's such a fake life. And I mean, ideally at some point, if this happens, you just realize it and you decide, oh, life is worth living. There is a lot of meaning to be found in it. It's just not in this industry. It's just not with these people. That's all. All of this is fake and it's all for money and nothing else. So I would just advise to find other people that have either exited like me in my blog, or other people that are doing other things now that are happy to talk about it. And I mean, just get inspired by other people that went through like bad experiences and just started over again.
Do you find that do you find that you've found your sexuality again? Like obviously you lose a little bit of that or a lot of that along the way. So does it come back, or how does that work?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking about this the other day. I think that it's going to take time because I noticed that I had, well, first off, as a sex worker, usually you don't want to have sex with like people recreationally because you're so busy having sex for work. So even wanting to in the first place, you kind of treat people, I know it's, you kind of treat sex acts as something that it's like, oh, well, clients always want this. So then you look at it and you're like, I don't want to do that. And then you're acting out these like ways that you would act in work with like personal people. And then you kind of realize that real intimacy is not anyone asking for things from you. It's not anyone treating you a certain way. Like it's completely different to have sex because you want to versus because you're getting paid to do it. And it's really hard to explain having unwanted sex for money, what the difference is between that and wanted sex. I mean, unless you've sold sex, there's no real way to just, because it's not rape either. It's like worse than rape because you consent to it. I've thought about going to like rape support groups because I kind of want like solace from these like unwanted sexual experiences, but I wonder if they'd like kick me out because I chose this non-consent. I consensually chose this unwanted sex, whereas they didn't choose, and maybe they'd be like, you don't belong here. You did it to yourself. I was my own oppressor, you know? So yeah, it's weird, but I guess it'll come back eventually. But I am just starting to date now. So I mean, even that's kind of like a new thing because I was single for like the almost the entire time that I escorted because I didn't see the value in a real relationship, which I think really played into being okay with being a sex worker. I didn't see the value. I kind of wonder about now, like, is that just society or was that me? Was it everything? Like, why did I not see the value in a relationship with a man? And now it's like, I understand it's fundamental to being an adult female is having a real relationship.
Sienna, there's so much, and we've just started to get into your story. And as you are now unpacking this, this is so crucial, the emotional impact. Would you be willing to stay for a second part so that we can really help people, and especially young people, understand that this is not something that is going to benefit them in the long run, even though it's being sold as empowering and a way to find their best life now, so to speak. Would you be willing to rejoin us for a part 2?
Sounds good.
Cool. Brad, thank you. The Sienna is a hero. I think she's willing to speak out.
100%. Thanks, John. Thanks, Sienna. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement. You can find us online at our website at unmaskingthetransmovement.com. You can also find our BitChute channel up and underway at bitchute.com. Just search for us, Unmasking the Trans Movement. I'll see you next time.